Good to have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate. India is at a very crucial juncture, viewers, as far as our battle against coronavirus is concerned. And I don't just say this because it's been 2 full weeks, 14 days of a lockdown for us, and we've got one more week to go. I say this because while we have contained ourselves indoors, while we have tried series of steps to ensure that there is a lockdown and the infection is confined to specific locations, while we have moved on to identify the hotspots and the clusters, we still haven't tested enough. We still don't know how many out there may have been infected. But starting tomorrow, we will be getting a new set of testing kits, the rapid testing kits. The first lot is set to arrive tomorrow. Now, individually, the states are working on different plans. For example, the Delhi government says they've ordered 1 lakh test kits and that they are going to ramp up their testing. On the other hand, you've got the state of Maharashtra that hasn't taken a decision on rapid testing so far. They say they have their doubts, they have some questions. So what is it? What should be India's testing strategy for coronavirus? How does it really work? And I don't just mean as a policy. I also mean how does it work for you and me? Because believe it or not, even after so many days, even after over a month of battling coronavirus, many people, including us, have a lot of questions when it comes to testing for coronavirus. Where do I go? Who do I show myself to? What symptoms should be there? At what point should I get worried? Is a rapid test kit better than a swab test? Are there any other options? Which one should I go for? So here is what we have decided. Tonight, viewers, we have 10 big questions. These questions relate directly to you and right up to relation to the policy. And over the next 1.5 hours, over the next 90 minutes, I will have experts answering each of these questions for us. Question number 1. What do I do if I have fever and cold? Yes, it may sound as if, oh, this is the first thing we learned. But you know what? Until it strikes you or somebody around you, you've probably not paid enough attention to know the exact procedure. So let's revise it one more time. Question number 2. Where can I get tested for coronavirus? We'll tell you. No matter which state you are in, we will tell you how to find the details for the nearby testing center. Question number 3. You've heard a lot of stories about people who go to a hospital and get turned away. What do I do if the hospital turns away? What are my options? Can the hospital really do that? Question number 4. What to do if someone around me starts to show symptoms? Question number 5, and this is the very interesting one. What is rapid testing? This phrase that everybody seems to be using. Question number 6. Does India have enough testing kits? We are told we are making some, we are told we are importing some, but is that also going to be enough considering we are about 1.3 billion of us? Question number 7. Should all states go for rapid testing? Should there be a uniform policy or does it depend on state to state? Question number 8. What is the difference between swab test and a rapid test? Question number 9. Why are few states raising concerns about rapid testing? We'll get you all the angles regarding this specific issue so we understand and you understand what is good and if there is anything bad about rapid testing kits. Question number 10. Will rapid testing help determine our next strategy? Whether or not a week from now we lift the lockdown or we continue to stay in a lockdown, a lot of it actually depends on what happens this week. It's an extremely crucial week. So let's say good evening to our first set of guests. Joining me right now, Dr. Arvind Lal. He's the chairman for Dr. Lal Path Labs. Joins us this evening. Dr. Trupti Gilada, consultant in infectious diseases with Masina Hospital. Dr. Shashank Joshi, Dean for the Indian College of Physicians at Lilavati Hospital. Always great to have him on the show. And Dr. Om Shrivastava, Director for Infectious Diseases at Jaslok Hospital and Research Center. Thank you so much. Let's begin and take it one by one. And I'm going to start with the basic. Dr. Gilada, what do I do if I have cough and cold? Is that one of the main symptoms, or should I wait? What should I do?
We understand that cough and cold is one of the main symptoms of COVID-19, but we also need to remember that that is also the main symptom of a lot of viral diseases like influenza. So if one gets cough and cold, the most important thing is please isolate yourself at home, be away from the others. Make sure your hand hygiene and your cough etiquettes are 100% being followed. Once that is done, you can definitely take something symptomatic, but call up your doctor. This is the time when your doctor will be more than happy to help you over the phone or over a text. Call up your doctor, explain what you have. It's even if this is COVID-19, we know that 80% of the individuals with mild symptoms will just have mild symptoms and improve with this disease just at home. So let your doctor take a call based on your symptoms, whether you need to be treated at home or in the hospital. And once you recover, which is going to be the next 5 to 7 days, you will have to take utmost care that you do not transmit the disease to someone else at home. The testing strategies at this point are not testing mild symptomatic cases unless they have been in contact with someone who tested positive. So most of the cases with mild symptoms will not be tested, at least at this point in time.
Okay, so that's one aspect of it. If I can just go across to Dr. Om Shrivastava as well. Dr. Om Shrivastava, what if I probably don't have corona, or I'm waiting for round 1 or 2 of my test results, or I just have a viral? Should I, at that stage, go out at all, or if I have any kind of medical condition or cold, should I simply stay indoors throughout this period?
So the common sense thing would be to stay indoors for the duration that you have symptoms, which should normally cease in about 5, 6, 7 days, no longer than that. The thing to be reassessing is that if your symptoms are worsening, or you have new symptoms, or you have things that you can't explain, things like getting short of breath, things like having those symptoms which should be causing you a little bit of to be more aware. In that case, yes, you must go to your local doctor. There are a number of designated hospitals which would be in your locality. You can look them up and get yourself tested there. Not to ignore a symptom that is worsening or a symptom that is new is probably what you need to be aware of. Other than that, look, 30% of people who get an cough, cold, fever kind of a story will have normal influenza illnesses, and a lot of them will be things that you don't need to get investigated for. So if you are getting worse, by all means, speak to your doctor, go to a close hospital, but not otherwise. I think the important thing is to ensure that you're not taking a decision out of anxiety or panic. You need to be able to rationalize what you're going through. If you can't do it, speak to somebody who can do it for you. That would be your doctor or your local hospital. Tanvi?
Okay. Okay, all right. Let me just move on to question number 2. And actually, this is the one that not too many people think about. When there is nothing to be scared about, but the minute a sign or a symptom shows, and then you start wondering. And I think Dr. Arvind Lal, the big question is, where do I go to get myself tested? Because obviously in the last 1 month things have changed. Firstly, it was just a couple of centers of the government. Then the government said some of the private labs can also start testing. Now, how do I know where to go, which hospital or which testing lab?
First thing which you'll have to find out, excuse me, is to either go to a government place or a private place. If you're going to a government place, then the procedure is that you have to go and show yourself to the doctors who are manning the COVID, wards, or they'll look at you there in the outpatient department. And if need be, they will admit you and also take your sample. So the story ends there as far as the government hospitals are concerned. And if you want to go to the private hospitals, you will have to see a doctor, and the doctor has to sign a form by the name, which is an ICMR developed form, in which, of course, your name, age, sex, etc., everything is written. But he'll also have to write down what kind of symptoms do you have. So once he has written down the symptoms, then we can be called. For example, Dr. Lal Path Labs will there's you can get us online. There's a separate number. There is an app, and then we once your documentation is complete, we send our technician to your house who wears PPE. The head to toe he's covered, and goggles and masks and gloves and proper shoe covers, etc. And then he takes two swabs from your nose, one from your nose and one from the oral pharynx, from the mouth. And then this is put into a viral transport media, and they are transported back to the lab at a low temperature between 2 degrees to 8 degrees centigrade, and then we do the rest in the lab. Once the tests come out, the first people who are to be informed are the ICMR people, whether it's a negative test or a positive test. Once we have informed the ICMR, then we release the results to the patient, usually by internet or on his email, etc. So that is the whole procedure.
Okay, a lot of people also ask this question to us that why are there multiple tests which are conducted? Just how seriously should the first test be taken? Dr. Shashank Joshi, if you can help us understand, while in our country we've done over 1 lakh tests, some of them, of course, have been a second round and a third round of tests for the existing patients. So the actual number of people who've been tested is even lesser, isn't it?
That's very true, because what happens is it's an evolving disease over a couple of weeks, and therefore, suppose somebody does the test on day 3, you might have to repeat the test on day 5 or day 10 as the symptoms do not improve. There are two things which I want to tell. First thing is we need to do a risk stratification. Even if you have a cough, cold or a fever, you need to know who is the high risk, very vulnerable group. So if you are a senior citizen above 60-65, if you are a diabetic, hypertensive, chronic lung disease, or you have immunocompromised states, or organ transplant patient taking immunosuppressive medicines, then you should actually be rushing for a test, because you are a vulnerable group after talking to your doctor. That is the first thing. And second thing is that if you are doing it on 3rd day or 4th day, then you might have to repeat it after 7 or 8 days if your symptoms have not resolved. So that is the second thing which you need to understand and recognize. And therefore, sometimes you might land up with some people landing up with 3 to 4 tests also, because it is important to do that. And that is one of the limitations of these swabs, and which is why probably when we discuss later, the rapid testing becomes very imperative.
In fact, we will come to the point of rapid testing in just a bit, because obviously that's going to be stage number 2, or the next stage for us, and starting tomorrow we will begin to get these kits. But before I go back to that, Dr. Arvind Lal, for our viewers to also understand, is there a preferable method for or kind of testing, or are they all the same that we have in India?
So let me first assure the readers, the viewers, that as far as we in the private practice are concerned, these rapid tests have not been opened up to us yet. They are only going to be in the government hands, because the government wants to go and test out those people who have been congregating there, like the recent case, etc., and people who have large amounts of congregations, or people who have migration cases, etc. So that is the reason. That is what is in the government's mind. As far as the normal man, common man is concerned, and people like us, well, I can assure you the test which is there for the masses is the RT-PCR test, which is a molecular diagnostics test. Second thing which I would like to tell you is that there is no rapid test or no antigen antibody test, which is positive within the first 7 days. Whereas the symptoms can start anything after day 1, and they usually go up to they're absolutely till 5. The patient is in agony. He is having breathing difficulties, etc. That's the time he may also go to the hospital. And this RT-PCR test is positive up till at least 21 days. So there is one test which is there right now for everybody. Right now, I'm saying because the antibody tests come in much later when the virus load in the society goes slightly low. There are large populations to be tested. You want to find out what is the immune status. And as I told you earlier, that the antibody tests start coming in the blood only from day 7 onwards. And there are two antibodies. I don't want to confuse you with this thing. One known as IgM rises up very sharply and comes down, and the IgG starts, prolonging, except it can go into months. We don't know about this virus yet. So I'm still, again, re-emphasizing that the main test which applies to the general public right now is the test known as RT-PCR, a molecular diagnostic test, and the other rapid tests are right now in the government hands. We don't know anything about it yet.
Okay, I just wanted to also check around, on the panel if there is a varying view on this, because there seems to be a bit of a disagreement on if there should be one consolidated test format or we can look at the antibodies test or rapid test is good enough or not. Dr. Shashank Joshi, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so two things. One is that RT-PCR or the swab test has a high amount of false negative, which is why we need to repeat it again and again. See, initially you may be asymptomatic, or in the first 5 to 7 days, the viral load is very high, and that is why its pickup rate is better. The antibodies, as Dr. Lal said, they actually start appearing on second and third day based on Chinese research. The serological tests developed in China and Korea, they start coming up on the second or third day, but they usually peak after a week. So that is a very rapid test. So sometimes you might have to do mix and match. Your PCR may be negative, your antibody will be positive. Later on, the yield of the RT-PCR comes down in the second week, and that is the time the antibody is required. Eventually, like we do for dengue, we do IgG, IgM. Dengue virus is very similar to the coronavirus. Eventually, we will have to have it. Right now, the government has restricted it for mass use, and they are only going to contain it for content population. But it is inappropriate to say that the antibody doesn't develop in the 7th day. By 3rd day, the antibodies are seen. Whatever is the published research in the public domain, it is very clear that it comes up on the 3rd day, and many asymptomatic cases are picked up by RT-PCR, but they have a small yield of false negativity, which is why the rapid diagnostic tests are being considered by the government.
Okay. There's also another question that people often ask us, and since we are right now in the zone of understanding it from a people point of view, I wanted to put this out there. Dr. Gilada, if there is a possibility that I am not showing symptoms but I may have been infected, then why is it that we are being told that we should wait for all the symptoms to appear before we go and get ourselves tested?
At this point in time, we know that there aren't enough test kits. So if there were test kits for everyone, it would have been the ideal scenario where anyone with symptoms or in contact with someone who had symptoms could just go and get themselves tested. At this point in time, when we really don't have enough test kits, we are trying to weigh on who needs the test more than the others. And like Dr. Joshi said, that the people who at this point, the symptomatic people who will need the test more are people who actually are so ill that they need to be in the hospital, or people in the vulnerable population, which is the older patients or with something chronic underlying. Having said that, we know that as these rapid tests become available, I think that will be the test that will be able to be used by a larger population, because they will be rapid, as the name suggests. The turnaround time is 15 to 20 minutes, and they're inexpensive. We understand we are in a resource limited setting, and a PCR test, even at this point in time in a private lab, costs around 4,500, whereas a rapid test is going to be in just 300 or 400 rupees. So the cost benefit ratio and the rapidity and the lesser logistic that's required by a rapid test will be a big plus in getting these tests out to people when they need it.
Okay, so far the questions that we've addressed, apart from, of course, when should we be getting tested, is what to do if I have fever and cold, where can I get myself tested, And the other question is, Dr. Srivastava, what if the hospital turns me away? Is that allowed? Or are all hospitals now supposed to look at COVID patients? Because the policy keeps changing. What is the current policy?
So a government hospital, look, you'll have to look at the question in the background of why a government hospital would turn you away. They probably always don't have the kind of resources that would accommodate, at an average, at the peak of previous epidemics, some of the government hospitals were screening about 1,000 patients a day, 1,000 samples a day. Now, when you've got that kind of volumes, it's not always possible to accommodate every person who comes for a test. Now, the doctor on call, on duty at that time will make an assessment, probably run it by his senior or her senior, and then come to a call that this kind of presentation does not require to be tested at this time. That is in a government hospital. As Dr. Lal was already mentioning a little while ago, you still have the option of going to your own doctor, taking a prescription, going to a private laboratory, and saying that you're willing to pay for the test and get yourself tested there. So the answer to the question is, with the choice that you have, you might be able to choose whether you want to go to a public hospital or a private one. But ultimately, it is not so much a matter of what you would like, but it's a matter of taking a consensus of what you think along with your doctor and then speaking what your problems are to the person who's likely to test you. So it would be a combination of what can be the best use of the facility at that time to the larger good, to the best served sort of population.
Okay, in fact, I just also want to highlight one more aspect, that while, and we are running the details on our screens as well, you can actually log on to government official websites, go to the page that tells you about testing centers, choose your own, select your own state and your city, and then find out where you can go and get yourself tested. But I also want to tell this to our viewers, because this has just happened today. The government has now decided that they're going to split the COVID hospitals and dedicated centers into three different parts, three different categories. There will be one category for mild symptoms, a second category for moderate symptoms, and then a third category for extremely severe symptoms or cases. And so there will be three different categories. But, when I was listening to that news briefing, Dr. Shashank Joshi, I was just wondering, how many people will understand this categorization? Will it not just cause a lot more confusion about where am I to go? Am I a serious case or a mild case? How do I find out which hospital or lab in my city will cater to my category?
So I think, what you're saying is right, that it might be a little confusing, but it is important to understand that we have a limited healthcare infrastructure. And rather than everybody crowding to a large public health system or a private health system, it is better to stratify it. And once you stratify it, it is easier to go. So somebody had just cough, cold like symptoms, they go to a clinic, which is a designated clinic of, say, MCGM, Mumbai Municipal Corporation, or a private setup, and then they get a testing done. If somebody is a little more serious than that, but is in the moderate category, will go to hospital A. But somebody is a senior citizen, somebody is a hypertensive or with heart failure, then that person immediately goes with symptoms like breathlessness to a severe healthcare facility. It is then easy to congregate, segregate healthcare infrastructure, do capacity building in a very systematic way, because remember, for the population density we have in cities like Mumbai or Delhi, we need to optimize healthcare delivery. So this is done for optimization of healthcare delivery, so that the best care is given from these resources which are available to us. The resources available to us are limited. Our healthcare infrastructure is inadequately skewed currently to treat the large populace. Suppose if 50% of our population is going to get the virus, 80% of the disease is going to be mild. It is pointless to have that 80% of the mild disease going to a severe or a moderate healthcare facility. So this is fundamentally done to protect the population at large as well as the healthcare infrastructure.
Okay, just to reiterate the symptoms of coronavirus as we move on to the next question, what to do if someone around me is showing these symptoms: cold and cough, sore throat, headache, fever, and difficulty in breathing. Sometimes these symptoms may not necessarily mean coronavirus. At other times, they may not be symptoms, but you may already have been infected. So it's a little tricky one right now, which is why we keep asking experts, as we are all discovering various aspects of it, and the science behind it and the research behind it is also evolving. Things are changing. If I can go across to Dr. Om Srivastava. Dr. Srivastava, if somebody around me is showing symptoms, what should be done?
Well, you probably need to be speaking to that person first, more than saying anything else, to making sure that that person understands that first is they should not be in the same space as other people who are not infected. So this person needs to be in a situation where he will be either self quarantined in a room or be in a hospital. Then you probably need to look at why this individual is getting tested or not getting tested. If they are not getting tested, you need to be talking to them, because look, other than trying to educate a certain person who may not be willing to be tested, I'm not sure if there's a great deal that you can do. I know of certain housing societies where they are insistent because there is a little bit of anxiety and fear. I don't think that's the right approach to go in these situations. The most important thing is to get the person to understand that by doing this, by being infected or by having symptoms, they are likely first to pass on the infection to others, which is why some of the hospitals that you mentioned a little while ago, they have been they've been shut down in a quarantine kind of a way, rather than coming to a situation where a large number of people are likely to be affected. It is better to have this one individual understand the risk of doing or not doing what they should be doing, get investigated and treated accordingly.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to the other big question, and this is the one that I've been looking forward to the most, because it's become such a big talking point, and everybody is discussing these rapid testing kits. What is a rapid testing kit? Let's begin with that. Dr. Trupti Gilada, do you want to explain to us how is a rapid testing kit different from what we have right now? Are these being used anywhere at all in our country so far, or do we get this first set tomorrow itself?
So the first thing to understand is the two different principles on which these two tests work. So the test that we've had up till now, which is the RT-PCR or the swab test, is something that detects the virus. So you take a sample from the throat or from the nasopharynx or the nasal area, and you look if there is a virus which multiplies. So that's to detect a virus. A rapid testing kit doesn't detect the virus, it detects the antibodies. And antibodies are things that are made by your body to fight, which is the immunity. And that's the reason why we understand that the first thing to come positive is going to be the virus. The next thing that comes positive is going to be the antibody. Now, the RT-PCR or the swab tests are tests that require very elaborate health lab setups and and the turnaround time is anything from 3 hours to 4 hours. Whereas the rapid testing kits, that it's a very simple card test, like how the pregnancy kits are. It's just a strip, you put in a sample of blood or plasma, and a line shows up which will tell you whether the person has the antibody or doesn't have the antibody. And that's the main difference, or the main difference in the principle between the two kits is one is based on the virus, the other is based on the immunity of the body.
Dr. Lal is also back with us. We had a bit of a technical glitch with him. Dr. Lal, we're right now on the question of rapid testing. What is that really about? Now, I'm given to understand that it's, and like Dr. Gilada was also pointing out, it's as simple as a pregnancy test. It's not extremely elaborate. It's fast. It gives you results within 30 minutes. Is there anything else that a viewer should know as India moves towards the phase of rapid testing?
So right now, we are dependent upon what the government policy is going to be. As of today, just now, the rapid tests or the antibody tests, as we call them, are only meant for the cluster containment zones. and for people with, who have migrated with large migration gatherings and evacuee centers. So there the government is, going to have this policy, and this actually is going to be those kind of people where they are suspecting that the antibodies have formed, as we had just discussed earlier. And right now it is not in private hands, and that's what I want to convey to everybody.
Are there any institutions which are currently making these kits in India as well, or are we solely depending on importing them?
We have heard about Indian suppliers, but I wouldn't be too sure right now because it is something which is very, very new. There are suppliers already in the market. We are assessing them. And the part of the confusion is that if we are not going to be testing in the private setup, then of course the whole exercise is, not for us. So we are going to wait and watch, and the government is also going to come out with a very, firm kind of a policy regarding the antibody tests, as we call them. That's a secondary issue, whether they're going to be rapid or not so rapid.
Okay.
But the first thing is that these are antibody tests. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, no. So, for example, this is what we know. When it comes to the central government and whether or not we have enough testing kits, about 7 lakh rapid antibody testing kits have been ordered so far. That these are going to be delivered in phases. So, the phase 1 delivery is actually expected to take place today. One would assume it will take them another few days to get this into the system so that people can start using these. 10 lakh RT-PCR testing kits have also been procured. Now, these are the ones we are already using.
Correct.
But the part about using this only in crowded clusters or in hotspots, is it because right now that's priority number 1, but ideally we should be using them everywhere, Dr. Lal?
So the thing is that the government is now also trying its level best to have a policy when the lockdown is going to be lifted. Now, it's not going to be that easy. And what we have read today in the papers, that there are going to be different zones. So there's going to be a red zone, which is not going to be, the thing is not going to be left in there. Then there's an orange zone, then there's going to be a green zone. So my take on the whole thing is that these, where the clusters are there, and slightly less than that, which is orange zone, the government is going to be using these rapid test kits there, because there is no point in having in the RT-PCR test so late in the containment of the virus. So these tests are meant to be used slightly later, and the government will get to know about the immune status of the individuals also, because people would be very in a great hurry to get back to work. So that also will tell them whether they are fully immune or not. But first thing first, let the government policy on this come out. Right now, our understanding is it is only meant for cluster zones and large migration places.
Okay, I also wanted to, take this question across to Dr. Shashank Joshi. Dr. Shashank Joshi, in a population of 1.3 billion people to have tested, carried out over only 1 lakh tests, obviously we know that we don't have enough testing kits, so we are using them very judiciously. But in such a scenario, would it then be advisable to simply continue with the lockdown until we've done a large-scale testing?
No, I think you ask a very relevant question. I think it's important to recognize that WHO policy is test, test, and test. And in that, rapid testing is currently being restricted because of lack of availability and lack of understanding, both. There are 2 types of rapid tests. One is, as Dr. Trupti Gilada said, which we can do by finger prick, which can be processed immediately. That will take a little longer time to come to India. But the other test is the one which is done by the ELISA method of doing the antibodies. There are 2 types of antibodies, IgG and IgM. IgM is the one which comes immediately, tells us that there is infection of COVID. And when IgG develops, we can give immunity certificates. You must have heard and read that in Taiwan or in Germany, they give immunity certificates. That means somebody got COVID. Is he now going to be infective, or can he be released into the community outside the isolation? Then that IgM has to be positive. And also we need to understand, a lot of people are saying that Indians have a good immunity. How will we understand whether Indians have good immunity or not? The only way we can do it is by doing this rapid test and identifying IgG and IgM. Now this finger prick test, like the blood glucose test which we do, that is a mixture of IgG, IgM both. So that will not be able to distinguish. While the blood test which we do by blood draw, that test is basically either IgG or IgM like we do for dengue. And that will clearly delineate whether there is active infection or there is infection antibodies already developed or not, which may even last for a year. So it is very important that eventually we will have to go for mass screening for our country. Right now, government has restricted its use to, as Dr. Lal said, to the red zones or the cluster zones where there are hot spots, and it is imperative that Mumbai and Maharashtra also get them as early as possible, because we have population dense areas like Dharavi and Malwani slums and many other parts of Mumbai which have lot of population density, and in them, to screen them, it is very imperative their cluster tracing. These rapid antibody tests will be extremely useful for the community at large.
Dr. Joshi, before I move on to our other panelists on this aspect, you also shared with us a very interesting graph which seems to suggest that the rapid test should not be used until symptoms have been there for at least 3 days. Would you like to explain that to us?
So you see, the point is that, as Dr. Lal also said, that in the first week, the viral load is very high. And when the viral load is very high, the swab yield is likely to be the best. Later on, the viremia comes down, the viral load comes down, and the antibodies start developing because body is fighting the virus. And therefore, in the first week, it is always better to do the swab test where the viral load, and if that is negative, and if you still have a doubt, then probably you might do the antibody test. After a week, probably the antibody test is better. That is how it is evolved across for all viral infections. It is not unique to COVID. It is unique to any respiratory viral infection or viral infection in general. Also, one more thing which we need to recognize, just like when we go for an operation, we do tests like blood sugar test, HIV test, HbSAg test, HCV test. Soon there will be a test which we will also screen for COVID, because it is also important to recognize that all the healthcare infrastructure which is taking care of patients, they need to know whether that individual who is asymptomatic is carrying or infective or not infective, so that appropriate precautions, because we have limited PPEs also. Are we going to be gowned out for every patient as a potential COVID? No. We will have to use different types of PPE based on positive and negative patients. And that is why also this antibody test becomes very critical for healthcare infrastructures and protecting the healthcare infrastructures and optimizing the use of PPEs.
Okay. All right. Let me take that point across to Dr. Lal and ask him as well. Dr. Lal, should there be these kind of guidelines that of course, the government will come out with a set of guidelines, but does the government also need to keep this in mind, that maybe you need to wait for a couple of days for symptoms to stay before you start using these kits?
As I mentioned earlier, it is imperative for us right now. We are in the fact finding, or we are trying to find out people who are suffering, because I think it's the basic right of every Indian and the country to find out each and every patient who is positive with this virus. He should not be left alone, because he can infect so many others, and he can also be, causing harm to himself. So I'm repeating what I said, that in the first 7 days, there is nothing like the RT-PCR, the molecular diagnostic test. After that, the antibodies start coming in. It's a matter of now medical discussion, and that the IgM, of course, will come up first. But the test which is being mooted in India is an IgM plus an IgG test. It's a combined test. So the efficacy of that and when it is going to be used, and again, I don't want to repeat myself, but ultimately, after some time, the antibodies test will be very useful. But it depends upon what India is looking for right now. If our job is to go and catch hold of each and every patient who has got this kind of a disease, he has to have those kind of symptoms, then the throat swab test and the nasal swab test is the best for the first 7 days. I must repeat that again. So that's the way we feel.
Okay, so we'll probably, by that then have to have a policy designed in such a manner that, the centers know what tests to carry out basis that patient's history, the symptoms that they are showing. But Dr. Srivastav, do you believe that once we get in these rapid testing kits, we need to also immediately on priority ramp up the use of the regular kits, the ones we are using right now, to figure out where we stand and just how much the infection has spread?
Yeah, so that's a work in progress. Okay, we will know precisely how much of our resources to use at which time over a period of the coming few weeks, maybe a coming few months. It would depend upon how soon we see the peak of the infection in our country, in India. How long does the peak last? When do the numbers start to dwindle and come into a figure that can be then said that, look, this is now like a community transmission or a community prevalence of an infection. Once we get into that stage, we'll probably be able to know with the resources that we have as to which ones are best optimized, which ones can be used for getting the maximum amount of information to make new policies, make new strategies for the coming few months, few years. So this is still a work in progress. I think it's probably we'll probably know more in the next maybe a month's time or 6 weeks time, and that this strategy, there is no strategy as of today that you can say this is going to be a permanent strategy. You'll probably have to evolve and change and refine and be more adaptive as and when the information comes your way, and find out what is the best use of the resources that you have at that time.
Okay, I just want to take our viewers through this data one more time. We've conducted about 1,706 tests so far. 836 tests were conducted in the last 24 hours. 11,795 tests in the last 1 week. There have been about 2,500 tests roughly that have been carried out in private testing labs. 136 government labs are also functioning and carrying out tests. And there are about 59 private labs permitted to test samples. Dr. Lal, is there a possibility that the government also looks at expanding the number of labs, or will that not help, keeping in mind that we only have limited testing kits?
So the government is pretty satisfied with the number of labs which they have, which is about 120 or 130 plus, and also they are looking at the private people, if they are really needed right now to
We seem to have lost that line with Dr. Lal. We're going to get back to him, but let me take that question across to Dr. Shashank Joshi. Dr. Joshi, would you want to weigh in on that? If we need more testing centers, or if that really won't help because we don't have enough testing kits?
I may sound very cynical, but we need to test more and more. The more, the better. We are a large geography. We have an impending epidemic. This is a no-brainer. We need to test more. Earlier, the better. We have resource limitations. We have prioritization and stratification. But the more we test, the better it is. We need RT-PCR for the early part, but those number of labs are limited. They are expensive, as Dr. Trupti said. We need to also do the rapid testing. We need to mix and match both. We have 1.3 billion people. We need to protect them. We need to take care of them. We can't keep them permanently locked in like this. It is important that we start moving ahead with our lives. This is just a virus. We need to tackle this at a war footing. And I'm sure that government is going to make indigenous kits in times to come, and therefore there will be a larger supply. Today, if there was everything available, I am certain the testing would have been done much more liberally. But currently, because we are resource limited, this has been done in a little more diligent way, and a priority A, priority B, priority C has been put. But if that was not an issue, it would have been mass screening. Trust me on this. And that would have been a much more apter and a quicker way, particularly in the red zones and in the yellow zones. In green zones, I would not look at it that aggressively. So it's very important that we need to test more on a war footing. I don't think 105 labs are enough for 1.3 billion people. I would disagree with Dr. Lal on that. And I'm very clear that we need to test much more. We need to have more molecular laboratories. India needs 1,000 molecular labs. India needs to do rapid testing. We need to do a 300, 400 rupee test, which everybody can afford and do and be comfortable with.
Okay, point well taken. I lost the line with Dr. Lal. Let me go back to him. Dr. Lal, go ahead, please. We can hear you now. Finish your point.
Yeah. So I'm not. There are two types of tests. Yes, rapid tests can be done by many more labs. There is no. That's not a. It's a no-brainer. But for the RT-PCR test, which is the test right now, and which the government has also ordered by a few lakhs, by the way. So this testing has to be ramped up, and it cannot be done in each and every lab. I mean, we people are running 204 labs. It's available only in 2 labs. So it's a test of which requires very great medical expertise. There are special rooms to be built, for this. The medical staff is much more qualified. And the nutshell, we are talking about two different things. So RT-PCR, of course, they need to do much more testing. But the number of labs, of course, will be few after the nearly 200 labs which we have. So I'm telling you about ourselves. Our capacity has not been reached, and that I can say the same thing for the private people also, and neither the government. The other day, I found out that there are 100 labs in the government and private which had not even conducted one RT-PCR test out of 198 or so. So there is private capacity lying here, but this is not to be confused with the rapid test which is coming in, which we are seeing that it's standing on the periphery and it might be used in these hot cluster zones, etc., etc. So for that, you do not need this kind of expertise which I just talked about. This can be done. This can be done in your normal kind of lab, routine labs. So that's a different story altogether. Yes, ma'am.
All right, point well taken. I am going to actually thank all of our panelists for joining us in this first round of conversation, where we've actually taken up 6 of those 10 questions. We will address the rest as well in a short time. But thank you to these panelists for joining us right now and answering our questions. Our only agenda is to help people understand better where we stand, what to do. If you have fever and cold, well, call up your doctor and speak to your doctor on the phone. Don't immediately go rushing to the center, because we have way too many of us, and that's just going to put an extra amount of load on our healthcare infrastructure, and it won't be able to handle it. If the doctor advises, then go ahead and get yourself tested. Where can you get yourself tested? Well, the ICMR website has all of the details state-wise on the existing testing centers. So check out those details and go to the ones who have been approved by the government. There are some government labs as well as some private labs who are currently carrying out testing. So far, we are only doing one method of testing, and that takes about 2 days for the results to come in. But we are looking at bringing in rapid testing kits. The first lot is set to arrive tomorrow, and once it arrives, then the government will initiate it and put it in the system, and we will begin to use those. But those will to only be used in hot spots, in crowded clusters, in areas where multiple cases have emerged, and so there is a need to quickly test and see how many more people may have been infected. Rapid tests can give you results in 30 minutes flat, and they are supposed to be much cheaper, which is why many are advocating for it. But is there a downside to it? And how many more will we need? Why are some of the states concerned about rapid testing kits? These are still some questions that need answers to. So stay with me. We'll be right back with lots more. Welcome back. Well, conversations have begun on what to do post April 14. 2 weeks of lockdown done. 1 more week is actually left. What happens after that? Some of the states have asked the centre to look at the possibility of extending the lockdown. Now, today there was a group of ministers who met, including Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh, the defence minister, and several other cabinet ministers were present to discuss the way forward. Questions were asked at the briefing that takes place every day at 4 p.m. That has Health Ministry as well as Home Ministry officials, and the Health Secretary told us that so far no decision has been taken. Yes, the states have approached the centre for an extension, and they will take a view on it after all of the review meetings are actually done. Listen in.
सर, इसके बारे में इससे पहले भी चीफ कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी साहब ने एक डिटेल अपना उन्होंने नोट इशू किया था। अभी जैसे आपने बताया ये रिक्वेस्ट आ रही है स्टेट से, अगर इसके बारे में कोई भी डिसीजन अप्रोप्रिएट लेवल पर डिस्कशन के बाद लिया जाएगा तो मैं आप लोगों की दृष्टि में ले आऊँगा।